Woke up early, dawn's out shining. Coffee brewing, thoughts aligning. Business world keeps redefining. Success is more than just headlining. Ray's got wisdom, Jim's got vision.
All right, thanks to our sponsor. We're back now. We're talking about the maintaining of the employee. And I know, so I'm going to beat him to the word, but I know part of maintaining the employee is building a good culture around the workplace. So, Ray, I'm going to give you what you love. Give us 3 points of how you build a better culture in order to maintain employees.
Well, there's probably many more than 3, but
I know, but we only have so much time.
I always get a kick out of watching a interviewee walk into our office, and what we have in our office is a central area where all the employees have a picture of themselves up on the wall, and usually the date, the month and year they started, and any awards they may have won, and of course their name. And I watched the prospective employee walking around the room and basically saying, "Oh, I know this person. That's my neighbor. That's my cousin." As they're walking around the room. So there's an air of familiarity with other employees immediately before they're even hired.
Okay, I got one quick question on that. One quick question. Do any of the employees have like bullseye targets around them and darts? Never mind.
No, but to that point, we never post anything negative on their whiteboard.
Right.
Just to basically, if there is something that we need to talk about that employee that could be negative, we'll just say, okay, see your manager. But we do absolutely post positive things like Mrs. Brown said you did an excellent job today. She loves you guys. But one other thing is I wanted to cover, because we're sort of talking about the environment, and that's the total environment. In other words, if you walk into a warehouse, it's not that welcoming. But if you walk into a nice, clean, crisp office environment, it is more welcoming. The individual feels more that they belong there. So a welcoming, belonging environment is extremely important, as well as being some familiarity with possibly other employees is an immediate thing that we try to get across to the prospective employee.
So I'll make one comment here based on my own experience. I spent 10 years working in the meat industry, 2 years in a slaughterhouse, and it's really, really bad when you walk in, see the real nice office part, and then it's this is where you're working, which is the battleground of a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
Seems like a bait and switch there. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Jim, to you, the same thing of how do you build a culture or environment that is welcoming, assuming you're not in a slaughterhouse?
You can do that too, but anyway, so I'll break it down into 3 areas. One is culture, but in that I will focus on what I would call the job itself. Is it challenging? Can you learn a lot? Do you enjoy it? Do you feel you're helping the customers? Do you have a great team? There's a whole bunch of things around the job This is probably the most important, that gets employees excited about going to work. So, my son's a software engineer. I'll come back to his company again, but as long as he was put on really challenging development problems, breaking new ground, whatever, he was going to stick around. So I'll use that. The second one is, and you can come back to any of them, is compensation. And that comes up, and I'm not a huge fan of compensation as retention, but you have to do it right. So, there's the base salary in the kinds of companies I'm talking about, and that, that needs to be competitive. But in different kinds of companies, there can be rewards, and the rewards need to be tied to two things. One is the individual's performance against specific goals, and the other is the performance of the company against specific goals that need to be well understood by the employees. And those are kind of co-equal. And then you can structure the rewards any number of ways, but relying simply on the rewards doesn't work. There needs to be a reward system that supports everything else. Yeah. And the third one, going back to my son's company, which is, he's no longer there now, but he was there for a very long time, called Red Ventures. RED are the initials of the founders. And it's a huge LLC in Charlotte, North Carolina. And you will appreciate this, Fred, but they do outsourced digital marketing. So they develop and run the websites for huge, all the major cable companies, all the major insurance companies. And then they also provide the help desk support behind that. So their campus in Charlotte has 6 bowling alleys, a full-size gymnasium with a track around the top, weight rooms, yoga rooms, bars, restaurants, movie theaters, hotel, tennis courts, putting greens. So every amenity you can think of. And I do, not every company can do that. It's sort of back to what's it look like when you walk in, right? But
yes.
But they've really built a culture around having a great workplace. And a lot of the people need, that's gotten a little dicey with remote work and so forth. But so when my son was working mostly remote during COVID, they did go in and use the tennis courts. And
all right. Yeah, so you triggered something as you're talking that, and then you alluded to it, is the remote work thing. And yes. How do you build a culture, a corporate culture, when people are working from home, working remotely?
That's a huge challenge. So I'll give it 2 quick shots. One is I teach the graduate project management course, and we talk about Agile. And one of the original principles about Agile project management is everyone had to be co-located. So all the developers have cubicles around a central conference room, which usually has glass walls, meet once a day, put shit on. So that was very important. So now it's, when we talk about Agile project management, you can still do a lot of the same things. So for example, what you used to post on the, sticky labels on the walls of the conference room, you have to use some sort of application like, WhatsApp or any of the others to maintain that kind of continuous communication. And then under Agile, you meet every day, Scrum meetings every morning, and you can do those over Zoom if you have to. So you can mitigate the issue to a large extent. It's not the same thing for sure, but and then so the general culture question is sort of situational dependent. But I gave you the one of Agile, but there's different approaches to the different ones too.
Ray, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think one of the things that came to mind when Jim was mentioning about the tennis courts and the cafeterias and all that, I think you'll find that type of environment mostly in companies that need people to think creatively. So it does free up when you
Yeah,
have
good point.
times to, when you have time to exercise or, not have to go out to lunch or something like that, you have more time for creativity. And I did work for a company called Treleaven that basically provided that type of environment, but that's another story.
So as you were both been talking this, I flashed on a couple of things. I used to be a consultant, so for me, I was very seldom in the office. I was always on a client site.
Sure.
But I also remember going up to Google a couple of years ago in Silicon Valley, and they've got all this stuff that looks more like a yuppie playground. Outside bar, bowling alleys,
Often referred to as the Googleplex.
Exactly. Shuffleboard courts, crap like that. And yet, these days, there seems to be it seems to be a fight to get people to come back into the office.
Well, that's simply because during COVID, they were required to work off. And
Right.
I think large companies are beginning to realize they can't maintain the culture in that type of environment. So they're requiring, it starts with, well, okay, you got to come in once a week. And then it becomes, okay, twice a week, 3 times a week. No, you got to come in full time now. And a lot of the companies are reverting back to people coming back into the office.
And not all employees find, it varies obviously, but a lot of employees find that preferable actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because one of the issues that companies worry about when people work at home is that they don't put in the time they would in the office. Studies have shown that the real issue is that when people work at home, they don't shut off work. And
that's true.
Which they would do if they were commuting.
And honestly, even as a small business owner or a consultant, I found when I didn't have an office to go to, it was kind of like I'd hit that chair, and then 16 hours later, still remember one night a friend asking me, how long have you been in front of the computer? And I looked at the clock and I said, since 8 a.m. and this was like 2 a.m. the next morning. And he said, put the keyboard down, walk away. You're getting loony. And it was one of those things of I found working out of the home office to be very isolating. And I worked a lot more than when I come into the office. So based on that, any final notes on training or maintaining employees for this episode of Pillars Principles?
One final note on that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but it's a known fact that what people miss the most when losing a job or basically being fired or laid off is not necessarily the pay, but the environment of the people that surrounded them in their job.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's another point.
Okay.
Absolutely. And, and I will, for both the kinds of companies Ray is talking about and the kinds I'm talking about, those companies run on the employees. We're not manufacturing anything. We're not. So the employee base is the company. So the stuff we're talking about is so important.
They're the face of the company.
All right. So in a future episode, we're going to come back to this topic because you just put an idea in my head of how is AI going to change this dynamic? Because it is obviously going back to the tech support thing, you're seeing more and more AI bots. How will that change it? But that's for another episode. So I'll give
actually multiple episodes, but we can fit it into one.
That's fine. So thanks to Ray Pillar and Jim Treleaven for another very interesting episode of Pillars Principles. We'll be back again in a week. Bye.
Woke up early, dawn's out shining. Coffee brew.